The city of Hadwell sprawled beneath the night sky like a circuit board brought to life, neon veins pulsing with electric blues and reds. In the back of an armored limousine that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, Cale sat with the stillness of a predator at rest. His tailored black suit fit him like armor, and the three men flanking him in the vehicle radiated the kind of controlled violence that made smart people cross the street. At 31, Cale commanded the Raijin syndicate with an iron fist wrapped in silk gloves. His word could topple businesses, redirect millions, or end lives. The underworld whispered his name with equal parts reverence and terror. But right now, none of that mattered. His long fingers, scarred from fights that had shaped him, held something fragile, a yellowed receipt from a late-night noodle stall, the ink faded but still readable. Bowl of spicy ramen with rice. 8001. 5 years old. Boss, Lieutenant H1 said from the front seat, his voice cutting through the silence. The Northern representatives are waiting at the club. This meeting could shift the entire power balance in our favor. Cale didn't look up from the receipt. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Change of plans, he said quietly. Take me to Marisol's kitchen. H1 turned, surprise flickering across his usually impassive face. Sir, the meeting can wait. Cale's dark eyes finally lifted, and the weight in them silenced any further objection. Some debts matter more than empires. If you believe one moment can change a life, stay with me. The convoy changed direction, sleek vehicles cutting through traffic like sharks through water. Cale returned his gaze to the receipt, his thumb tracing the edge where the paper had begun to fray. He remembered everything about that night. The pain, the cold, the certainty that he would die in that alley, unmourned and unforgiven. And he remembered her. 5 years earlier, blood had a metallic taste that Cale knew too well, but that night, it filled his mouth with the bitterness of failure. At 26, he'd been a rising enforcer in the organization, feared for his efficiency and ruthlessness. Then he'd made the mistake of showing mercy. The raid was supposed to be simple: a rival gang's warehouse, eliminate anyone inside, send a message written in violence. But Cale had found children hiding in a storage room, a boy no older than 8, clutching his sister. Their mother worked for the rival gang as a cook, nothing more. He'd let them go. His superiors found out. The punishment was swift and brutal. 3 of his own colleagues had beaten him in that alley, taking their time, making sure he understood the cost of weakness. When they finally left him there, they'd taken his phone, his wallet, everything but the clothes on his back and the lesson carved into his ribs. Mercy is a luxury you can't afford, the last one had said before spitting on him. Cale had tried to stand, failed, collapsed again. The winter air cut through his torn jacket like knives. His vision blurred, darkness creeping in at the edges. He'd fought in that alley, fought against unconsciousness, against the cold, against the growing certainty that this was where his story ended, not in glory, but in garbage and regret. Then he'd seen light spilling from a doorway. A small kitchen, still open despite the late hour. Marisol's kitchen, the weathered sign read. He'd crawled toward it the way a dying man crawls toward an oasis, unsure if it was real or just another cruel trick of a fading mind. The door had opened before he reached it. "Oh, God," a woman's voice had said, and then there were hands on him, surprisingly strong hands, pulling him inside. Cale had looked up through swollen eyes and seen her for the first time. African descent, skin like warm bronze in the kitchen's light, hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her face showed exhaustion, the bone-deep kind that came from working 16-hour days, but her eyes were alert, assessing his injuries with a clinical efficiency that surprised him. "Can you walk?" Marisol had asked, already moving to support his weight. "Why are you helping me?" The words came out slurred, his split lip making speech difficult. She'd paused, looked at him with those steady eyes. "Because you're hurt. What other reason do I need?" In Cale's world, there were always other reasons. Always angles, always transactions, always debts. Help came with invisible price tags that strangled you later. But something in her voice told him she meant exactly what she said. She'd helped him to a chair in the back of the kitchen, moving with practiced efficiency. The diner was small, maybe 8 tables total, worn linoleum floors and equipment that had seen better decades. But it was clean, meticulously so, and it smelled like home, a concept Kale barely remembered. "I should call an ambulance," Marisol said, examining the gash on his forehead. "No." His hand shot out, grabbed her wrist. Too hard. She didn't flinch. No hospitals. No police. She'd studied him for a long moment, and Kale knew she was making calculations about what kind of man ended up beaten in an alley begging for no police. He waited for fear to enter her eyes, for her to realize what he was, and throw him out. Instead, she'd simply nodded. "Okay. But I'm going to clean these wounds, and if I think you're dying, I'm calling for help whether you like it or not. Deal?" Deal? She'd worked on him for over an hour. Cleaned wounds, applied antiseptic that made him hiss through clenched teeth, wrapped his ribs with strips torn from a clean kitchen towel. Her hands were gentle but sure, and she hummed softly while she worked some melody he didn't recognize but found comforting nonetheless. "You do this often?" Kale had asked, trying to distract himself from the pain. "Patch up strangers?" "First time, actually." A small smile had touched her lips. "I've got first aid training from back home, but usually I just use it for kitchen burns. You're significantly more beat up than a hot pan. Sorry to complicate your evening. Don't apologize for being hurt." She'd met his eyes, and the kindness there had hit him harder than any of the blows that brought him to her door. "Nobody deserves this. Whatever you think you did." When she'd finally finished, Marisol had stepped back, surveying her work. "You should rest, but I'm guessing you won't. At least let me feed you before you go do whatever foolish thing you're planning." "I don't have money to did I ask for money?" She'd turned toward the stove, already pulling out ingredients. "You're hurt and probably haven't eaten all day. I'm feeding you. End of discussion." This is where everything changes. Don't blink. Kale had watched her work, mesmerized by the simple grace of it. The way she moved through her kitchen like a dancer who'd performed the same routine 1,000 times but still found joy in it. She'd prepared a bowl of spicy ramen, added a soft-boiled egg, vegetables, and a side of rice. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive. But when she placed it in front of him, steam rising into the cold kitchen air, it was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "Eat," she'd commanded gently. "You look like you need it." The first bite had nearly broken him. Not because of the taste, though. It was delicious. Perfectly balanced heat and umami, but because of what it represented. Kindness without condition. Care without cost. Someone seeing him at his worst and choosing compassion anyway. He'd eaten slowly, savoring every bite, and when he'd finished, Marisol had simply collected the bowl and returned with another. "You're going to make me fat," he'd said, attempting humor through the emotion clogging his throat. "You need it. You're all bone and bruises." She'd leaned against the counter, arms crossed, studying him with curious eyes. "You have a name, or should I just call you Trouble?" "Kyle." She'd extended her hand, and he'd shaken it, acutely aware of how small hers was in his, how warm. "Nice to meet you, Kale, despite the circumstances." They'd talked while he ate the second bowl. Or rather, she'd talked and he'd listened, drinking in the normalcy of it like a man dying of thirst. She told him about the diner, inherited from an uncle who'd passed 2 years prior, about the struggle to keep it running, the rising rents, the developers circling like vultures. About her dreams of expanding, maybe adding breakfast service, maybe hiring help so she could sleep more than 4 hours a night. "Why stay?" Kale had asked. "If it's this hard, why not sell?" "Because it's mine." Simple words, but the conviction behind them was steel. "My uncle built this place from nothing. Fed this neighborhood for 30 years. When everyone told him an African immigrant couldn't make it here, he proved them wrong. I'm not giving up on his dream just because it's hard." Kale had understood that kind of stubborn pride, respected it. Eventually, he'd known he had to leave. Staying put her at risk. His people would be looking for him, and if they found him here, found her helping him, the consequences would be severe. For both of them. He'd stood, every muscle screaming protest, and she'd moved to help him but stopped when he raised a hand. "Thank you," he'd said, the words inadequate for what she'd given him. "For everything. Just promise me you'll be careful out there." Marisol had smiled, sad and knowing. "Whatever world you come from, it seems like it chews people up." "It does." Cale had looked at her, this woman who'd saved him without asking for anything, who'd shown him that kindness still existed in dark places. A crazy thought had seized him, born from desperation and gratitude, and something he didn't want to name. "I'm going to make you a promise." "You don't have to when I'm rich," he'd interrupted, his voice gaining strength. "When I've climbed out of the pit I'm in and made something of myself, I'm coming back. And when I do, I'm going to marry you, Marisol. That's a promise." She'd laughed, thinking he was joking or delirious or both. "You don't even know me." "I know enough. I know you're the best person I've ever met." He'd pulled out his wallet empty of cash but still containing a few cards, grabbed the receipt she'd written for the meal, though she'd clearly had no intention of charging him, folded it carefully, and put it in his inner pocket. "I'll come back. Remember me." "I will," she'd said, still smiling, clearly humoring him. "Go on, before you collapse again." He'd walked out into the cold night, broken but alive, carrying her kindness like a torch in the darkness, and he'd meant every word of that promise. 5 years changed everything and nothing. Marisol's kitchen still stood on the same corner, but the neighborhood around it had transformed. New high-rises cast long shadows. Trendy cafes had sprouted like mushrooms, charging 5 times what Marisol did for coffee. The developers' vultures had landed. Marisol wiped down the counter for the 3rd time that hour, a nervous habit when she was stressed. The dinner rush had been pathetic, 4 customers total. The lunch rush hadn't been much better. Her best friend Juno sat at the corner table, nursing a coffee and pretending not to notice Marisol's anxiety. "You should take their offer," Juno said finally, her voice gentle but firm. "The developer's latest bid is generous. You could pay off your debts and have enough left over to start fresh somewhere else." "This is somewhere else." Marisol tossed the rag into the sink harder than necessary. "This is where I belong. Belonging doesn't pay bills, Mari." Juno stood, approached the counter, her dark eyes full of concern. "I love you, and I love what you're trying to do here, but you can't save a sinking ship with pride alone. The numbers don't lie." Marisol knew the numbers. Knew them intimately. Rent up 40% in 2 years. Ingredient costs climbing. Customer base shrinking as old regulars moved away and new residents preferred Instagram-worthy brunches to her honest, working-class cooking. The spreadsheet on her laptop painted a picture of slow-motion collapse. "1 more month," Marisol said. "Give me 1 more month to turn things around." "You said that 3 months ago. I mean it this time." Juno sighed, the sound full of love and frustration. "Okay, 1 more month. But Mary, you need to prepare yourself for the possibility that the door crashed open." 3 men entered, and Marisol's blood went cold. She recognized the type immediately: the swagger, the barely concealed violence, the way they looked at her diner like they owned it. The leader was a thick-set man with a scar running from his temple to his jaw, wearing an expensive leather jacket that screamed organized crime. "Marisol, right?" The scarred man Goro, she'd later learn, smiled without warmth. "We need to have a conversation about this property. The diner's not for sale." Marisol kept her voice steady, though her heart hammered against her ribs. "I've told the developers that repeatedly." "Yeah, about that." Goro approached the counter, his men fanning out to block the door. "See, the developers hired us to make sure you understand the situation. This neighborhood's changing. You're a holdout. Holdouts create problems. I have a lease." She stood straighter, refusing to show fear. "Legal rights. Legal rights. Legal." Goro laughed, a sound like rocks grinding. "That's cute. You think paperwork matters when you're standing in our way? One of his men casually picked up a chair and examined it. The threat was clear. Juno moved closer to Marisol, her phone in her hand. We're calling the police. Go ahead. Goro's smile widened. By the time they arrive, you'll be explaining how all your equipment mysteriously broke, how you slipped and fell. Accidents happen, you know, especially in kitchens. Dangerous places, kitchens. Marisol's mind raced. She'd heard stories about this, about businesses that refused to sell suddenly facing mysterious fires, vandalism, worse. The police were stretched thin, often looked the other way when organized crime was involved. She was alone in this, outmatched, and the rumble of engines cut through her spiraling thoughts. Goro frowned, turned toward the window. Outside, black SUVs were pulling up, one after another, moving with military precision. Doors opened simultaneously. Men emerged, not thugs like Goro's crew, but something else entirely. Elite, professional, dangerous in a way that made Goro's men look like amateurs playing dress-up. And then he stepped out. Marisol's breath caught. Kale. But not the broken man from 5 years ago. This Kale moved like power incarnate, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His hair was styled back, revealing a face that had hardened into something commanding. Scars, she remembered, had faded, but not disappeared. New ones had joined them. His men formed a corridor, and he walked through it with the kind of presence that made the entire street seem to hold its breath. The door to her diner opened. Kale stepped inside, and Goro's confidence evaporated like water on hot steel. "You!" Goro breathed, recognition and terror mixing in his voice. You're the leave." Kale's voice was quiet, conversational almost, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. "Now, and tell your employers that this property is under my protection. Marisol's kitchen doesn't close. Ever." Goro's men were already backing toward the door, their earlier bravado completely gone. Goro himself stood frozen, probably calculating the cost of defiance versus the humiliation of retreat. "The Northern Syndicate," he started. "I know who employs you." Kale took a single step forward, and Goro flinched. "Tell them Kale of Rugine sends his regards. Tell them this block is mine now. Tell them if they have questions, they know where to find me." The name did what violence couldn't. Goro and his men practically ran out the door, stumbling over each other in their haste to escape. The SUVs that had delivered them had mysteriously vanished, leaving them to flee on foot. Silence filled the diner. Juno stared, mouth open. What the hell just happened? But Marisol only had eyes for Kale. He'd turned to face her, and despite everything, the power, the expensive suit, the small army waiting outside his eyes, held the same desperate hope she'd seen 5 years ago when he'd crawled to her door. "Hi," he said, and the single syllable carried 5 years of longing. "Hi yourself." Marisol came around the counter slowly, studying him. "You're different." "I kept my promise." He reached into his jacket, pulled out something carefully preserved in plastic. The receipt, her receipt, from that night. "When I'm rich," I said. "When I've made something of myself, you became a crime lord." She said it flatly, trying to process. "That's your something?" "I became someone who could protect you." Kale took a step closer, then stopped, respecting the space between them. "Someone who could make sure no one ever threatens you again. Someone worthy of the woman who saved me when she had no reason to." "I had a reason." Marisol's voice cracked slightly. "You needed help. You showed me kindness exists." He looked at the receipt in his hands. "In my world, Marisol, kindness is currency no one trades in. It's weakness, liability, something to exploit. But you gave it freely, expecting nothing. You changed me that night, into a mafia boss, into someone who remembers he's human." Kale's jaw tightened. "I won't pretend what I do is noble. I've built an empire on fear and force, but I've also protected people, neighborhoods, families that the law forgot. And every decision I make, I ask myself one question: what would the woman who saved me think? Marisol felt tears threatening and blinked them back. You actually came back, I promised. I thought you were delirious. Or joking. Or both. She laughed, the sound somewhere between joy and disbelief. Kale, you said you'd marry me. We shared one meal, one conversation. I know. He set the receipt down on the counter between them, a fragile bridge across 5 years. And I know that was crazy. Maybe it still is. I'm not here to demand you honor some promise you never made. I'm here because I owed you truth and protection and the chance to decide for yourself. Decide what? Whether the man I became is someone you could ever care for. Vulnerability flickered across his face, there and gone. I'm rich, like I said I'd be. I have power, influence. But none of it means anything if I can't stand here and be worthy of the woman who saw me at my lowest and chose compassion. If this moment hits you, you already know how this ends. Juno cleared her throat. I'm going to step outside and give you two some privacy. Also because there are like 20 scary men with guns out there, and I'm processing a lot right now. She slipped out, leaving them alone. Marisol picked up the receipt, examined it through the plastic. Her handwriting, younger and more careless. 8,001. Such a small amount for something that had changed both their lives. I never forgot you, she admitted quietly. I told myself I was being ridiculous, remembering some hurt man who stumbled into my kitchen. But sometimes late at night, when the bills got too high and the stress too much, I'd wonder what happened to you. If you were okay. If you'd really meant what you said. Every word. Kale's hands clenched and unclenched at his sides, like he was restraining himself from reaching for her. I built everything thinking about this moment, imagining walking back through that door, seeing you again. And now I'm terrified. The admission seemed to cost him. Because you have every right to tell me to leave. What I am, what I do, it's dangerous. Dark. You showed me light, Marisol, but I'm still a man who lives in shadows. She studied him, this impossible man who'd kept an impossible promise, saw the boy who'd crawled to her door in the man who commanded empires, saw vulnerability beneath the armor of power. I'm not looking to be rescued, Marisol said finally. I've been taking care of myself for a long time. I know. I saw how you stood up to Goro. You were magnificent. But I could use a partner. She took a breath, made her choice. Someone who understands what it means to fight for something. Who keeps their promises, no matter how long it takes. Hope transformed Kale's face, made him look young again. Are you saying? I'm saying, let's start over, properly this time. She extended her hand across the counter. Hi, I'm Marisol. I run this diner, and I'm stubborn, and I work too hard, and I definitely don't have my life figured out. He took her hand, held it gently. I'm Kale. I run a criminal syndicate. I'm dangerous, and I've been in love with you since you gave me ramen and showed me what kindness looks like. That's quite an introduction. Ta much? Perfectly honest. She squeezed his hand. That's what I need. Honesty. No games, no rescuing, no putting me on a pedestal. Just two people figuring out if this crazy thing between us could actually work. I can do that. Kale smiled, really smiled, and it transformed him, though I'm keeping my promise about the protection. This neighborhood is under Ryujin's shield now. No more developers, no more thugs. I won't say no to that. Marisol finally let herself smile back. But I'm paying my own bills. Wouldn't dream of interfering. And if we do this, if we try, I need to know the real you. All of it. The good, the bad, the complicated. That's only fair. He paused, seemed to gather courage. Though I warn you, it's mostly complicated with occasional moments of bad and rare glimpses of good. I think I can handle it. She pulled her hand back reluctantly. Want some ramen? I remember you liked it spicy. I'd love that. But Marisol? Yeah? Can I ask you something I've been wondering for 5 years? Go ahead. Why did you help me that night? Really? You could have walked past, called the police, left me there, but you didn't. Marisol considered the question, thought back to that cold night when she'd found a broken man on her doorstep. My uncle used to say that how you treat people when they can't do anything for you shows who you really are, she said finally. You were hurt and alone. That was enough, and maybe, she paused, choosing honesty. Maybe I saw something in your eyes, something that told me you were more than whatever put you in that alley. You saw better than I deserved. I saw possibility. She moved toward the stove, pulling out ingredients from muscle memory. And, apparently, I was right. 3 months later, the diner had never been busier. Not because Cale had interfered, he'd kept his word about that, but because word had spread that Marisol's kitchen was the real deal. The food was incredible, the prices fair, and somehow the place had the most interesting mix of customers in the entire city. Businessmen sat next to construction workers, artists shared tables with office workers, and occasionally, very occasionally, men in expensive suits with dangerous eyes would arrive, eat quietly, and leave generous tips. Marisol had hired staff, finally 3 people who helped with prep and service, giving her actual time to sleep and, increasingly, to spend with Cale. They took it slow, building something real from that foundation of kindness and promises. He was teaching her about his world, and she was teaching him about hers. It wasn't always easy. His life was complicated, dangerous in ways that sometimes kept her up at night. But he was true. That mattered most. The framed receipt hung on the wall now, positioned where customers could see it. Most didn't understand its significance. But every time Cale came in, and he came in often, sometimes for meals, sometimes just to sit at the counter and watch her work, he'd glance at it and smile. Tonight, the dinner rush had ended. Staff had gone home. Marisol was wiping down tables when Cale arrived, trading his usual convoy for a single car and driver. Hey, he said, settling onto his usual stool. Busy night? Very. We're actually turning a profit now. Can you believe it? I can. He watched her move around the kitchen with obvious affection. You're brilliant at what you do. Flatterer. But she smiled, pleased. Want something to eat? Actually, I came to ask you something. The seriousness in his tone made her turn fully toward him. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. He stood, came around the counter. Everything's right, actually. Maybe too right, and I'm terrifying myself thinking I'll mess it up. Cale, what he pulled out a small box. Not a ring box, they'd talked about that, about taking time, about not rushing. This was different. Inside was a key. It's to my apartment, he said. I want you to have it. Not because I'm asking you to move in yet, but because I want you to know you have a place. A safe place. Allweis. Marisol took the key, felt the weight of trust it represented. This is big. It is, and I'm asking for something in return. What? Let me tell you the whole truth. He took a breath. About what I do, who I've hurt, the lines I've crossed. You said you wanted honesty. I'm ready to give it. She'd known this conversation was coming. Dreaded it, if she was honest, because knowing details would make everything more real, more complicated. But she'd meant what she said about wanting truth. Okay, she said. Tell me. They talked until dawn. Cale held nothing back, the violence, the moral compromises, the people he'd failed to save, and the ones he'd deliberately hurt. Marisol listened, asked questions, struggled with some answers but never looked away. When he finished, pale light was creeping through the windows. So, he said finally, voice raw from talking. Now you know. I understand if this is too much. If I'm too much. Marisol was quiet for a long moment, processing everything she'd heard. I won't lie and say I'm comfortable with all of it, she said finally. Some of what you've done, it's hard to reconcile with the man I'm getting to know. I know, but... She reached across, took his hand. I also see someone who's trying to be better, Who uses his power to protect people like me, neighborhoods like this? Who keeps his promises even when it takes 5 years? Marisol, I'm choosing you, Kale. The complicated, dangerous, trying to be better you. But I need you to keep choosing me too. Keep being honest. Keep letting me see all of you. Not just the parts you think I'll accept. Alvise. He brought her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. You made me believe I could be more than what I was. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to deserve that faith. You already do. She smiled, exhausted but certain. Now, come on. I'll make us breakfast. Ramen? Perfect. As she worked, Kale watched her move through her domain with the same grace that had captivated him 5 years ago. Outside, Hanuel City was waking up, still gritty, still complicated, still full of shadows. But here, in this small kitchen where everything began, light persisted. A receipt on the wall, a promise kept, 2 people choosing each other against all odds. Kindness had rippled across 5 years and transformed everything. What promise are you carrying, and who are you becoming to keep it? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story moved you, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss more interesting stories like this. Stories like this need to be shared. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.